Welcome back to my video podcast. And it is a video, but it's a podcast. You can just listen to it. You don't have to watch, all right? There's really not going to be a lot to watch. But I am talking about this book that I wrote in 2010, and it's just basic, what I think is common sense for home-based business owners. But a lot of people apparently don't know this stuff. Because I saw people when I was doing I used to do custom wedding cakes before I even started selling online. I was seeing people do this kind of stuff all the time, and I'm still seeing people do it. It's just a different context, all right? So I'm actually going to read the first part of this because it sets the whole thing up. And this week's episode is called Get It in Writing because it's about getting things in writing, whether it's your listing descriptions on Etsy or your website or a contract if you're doing things in person or for custom work. There are a lot of ways that you get things in writing, and there are a lot of things that you need to make sure are filled out correctly, because if you don't, then it's not going to end well for you. All right. So let's go back and remember that the woman in this, I made this woman up. She's a victim. She's terrible. And she makes all kinds of mistakes. Her name is Lucy. And she, this week, got an order from a friend of a friend, which is just never good. I'll get into that in a minute. But this lady says that she told her she wanted to buy 20 gift baskets to distribute at her club's annual meeting, which was 2 months away, as thank you gifts and door prizes. Now that seems legitimate, right? Okay, so Lucy was thrilled because this was her biggest order so far. The specifics of the gift baskets were left up to her, with the theme of casino being the only guideline. Lucy designed the baskets, put them all together, and when the week of the event came, she called the lady who had ordered them. At first, the lady was a little confused, but then she remembered she had ordered the baskets. Unfortunately, she had decided to go in a different direction and had forgotten to call to cancel. She told Lucy that she had already bought other items to use for the gifts, and that the theme of the event had changed from casino to English garden. So even if she wanted to, which she didn't, she wouldn't be able to use Lucy's baskets anyway. She apologized profusely, but at the result was that Lucy had lost the order and was out the time and money that she had spent on the baskets. All right, now look. You all could be saying, that's ridiculous. No one would do that. Well, I can tell you 100% that when I was doing cakes, there were so many people who would say, I had this order and she's not coming to pick it up. How long should I wait? And we're like, well, when did she say she was going to pick it up? Oh, well, she didn't really say she was coming. It's like, then we would say, what do you mean she didn't say she was coming? Well, she told me last week that she might need the cake. And so I went ahead and made it. And we would say, did she pay you? And the answer would be no. And we would say, you are eating a lot of cake for the rest of the weekend because you didn't have an order, right? Just because someone says, I might need this, it doesn't mean that you have an order. And this is the same thing on Etsy. I see cake decorators doing it, but I see people on Etsy doing it too. And it's usually because you're excited that you got a big order, or it's your first order or whatever. And a lot of scammers take advantage of this. I will say that a lot of scammers will contact newer Etsy sellers who don't have that many sales because they know that we get excited when you get your first sale, and you kind of let the red flags go by. You don't pay attention to them. But you need to understand that unless you have payment, you don't have an order. It's just an inquiry, all right? You don't have a customer until someone pays you, especially if you're doing custom work. Now, everyone for custom work is going to set up your own payment schedule. When I did wedding cakes, it was all custom work. I would require a 50% non-refundable retainer, not a deposit, because the deposit goes toward the cost of the final product. And if they canceled, there is no final product, so they could say, I want my deposit back, I didn't get a product. This is a non-refundable retainer, which is retaining my services for the time that it will take to make your product. After that, 2 weeks before is when the final payment was due. Not after the cake was delivered, not after the wedding when people try to forget that they owe money. 2 weeks before. And I had you should have seen my contract. I had all kinds of clauses in my contract that said, if it is 1 day late, then you need to pay me a late fee. If it is 2 days late, blah, blah, blah. If it is a week late, I cancel your order. And I assume that the wedding is canceled. And I did that a few times. And sometimes the wedding was canceled. See, this is the thing. When people cancel an event, they don't necessarily want to tell everybody. They just kind of assume that people will know from the ether that their event is canceled if they don't pay the second part. But you need to make sure that you have a contract or some way of scheduling payments, if you do take payments, that you get your money before you actually deliver the product and before you actually make the thing. Now, personally, if I was going to make something custom for someone, there are times when you would have to get them to approve it, like if it's a logo or if it's, if it's something that you could change easily. But if it's something like an oil painting, no, you don't get approval. You don't get to pay it after you approve the final product, because that's not the kind of thing that the artist can change easily, right? And you also don't send them pictures as you're working on it. This is something that people wanted. Can you send me pictures as you're decorating the cake? The answer is no. And the reason for that is that they will say, oh, can you move that to the left a little bit? Oh, wait, that's not the right color. I want it to be a little more blue. No, that doesn't happen. So you have to really take all this into account and just assume that people need to have limits, again, with the limits, right? People need to have limits put on them, and you need to put limits on yourself as to what you are willing to do for a customer, because it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well when you let customers have too much input into the design process. If they're hiring you, they should trust you to do the design, whatever. Now, let's say that you do have a graphic design business or something like that where customers do have to approve the final product. You could set it up like, I'm going to do 3 logos for you, and that's what you're paying for, and then you can choose one of them and you get 1 revision. Don't let them have unlimited revisions, and you need to tell them up front, this is what you're paying for and this is what's included. 1 revision, 2 revisions, whatever you want, but I would keep it to 1 revision and 3 options, 1 revision. Just make it so that you're not saying, here it is, take it, and they don't get any input, but limit their input, because when people know that they have limited input, then they will make a decision. If you let people change things, they will wishy-wash back and forth. They will change it will never end. So give them a certain number of free revisions included with the price. And then after that, they get to pay you a design fee. And don't make it cheap. Don't make your design fee cheap, because you're not only designing something different or changing something in the design, you are dealing with a customer, and that's a time thing. So, you have a revision, and then if they say, wait, I want you to redo it completely, well, then they get to buy another one. We get to start from scratch and they get to pay for another one. You need to figure this out for yourself before you even start selling anything, before you take custom orders, before you have this kind of situation arise. And I will say that when I did my wedding cake contract, which was 5 or 6 pages long, I'm not kidding, and some venue contracts are 20 pages long because they have restrictions for everything. And brides they're used to that. People are used to that. Now, cake customers might not be used to that. And I had the same contract that I used for every cake, regardless of whether it was a wedding cake or a sheet cake. I didn't care. I used the same contract. It had a place on it where I wrote everything out. This is what it's going to look like. This is the flavors. This is what it's going to have on it. And that way I could say, this is what you ordered. The customer could read it and say, yes, that's what I'm ordering. They sign it, you sign it, each of you get a copy. And then if there's any disputes, you can refer to the contract. That won't always stop people. Okay, I'll tell you the story of the worst wedding cake customer I ever had in a little bit. But some people don't read. Some people just assume that they're going to get their way and it doesn't matter. But you need to have a contract so that you can point to it and say, this is what you ordered. Now, if you're selling online, it's the same thing with your shop policies. And I will say that I've seen a lot of Etsy shop owners who don't have policies in place. And I don't know if they just assume that people know that they don't offer refunds, or that they can only return things within a week, or whatever it is. You have to have your policies in place. And for Etsy, that's get it in writing. You have to have on your website privacy policies. You have to have your return policies, your shipping policies. Everything needs to be there in writing so that people can read it. Whether they choose to read it or not is out of your control, but at least you'll have it there so that you have it in writing for when they do choose to argue with you about something, right? So just get everything in writing. Also, for your product descriptions, you need to have good product descriptions. I've seen some product descriptions that are 3 lines long, and it's not good. Make sure your product descriptions are thorough and explain the sizes, the colors, whatever the specifics are of something. Make sure that your product photos actually show what you're going to ship. And that's really important. Anytime there's a dispute about, you didn't ship me what I said that I thought I ordered, you can refer back and say, Now I know that a lot of times people have problems with somebody saying, oh, I thought it was going to be bigger than that. And then you can say, well, the picture with the ruler in the second listing photo shows exact size, and that's what I sent you. And, as long as you have everything there, you have it in writing. The customer buying that is a contract. They are agreeing to pay you for what you are showing in your listing. That's a contract. And it gets really tricky when you start doing custom orders for people, because then you get the back and forth and you have to agree to things and that kind of stuff. I 100%, if I had a business that I was selling online where I had people who were ordering custom graphics, custom artwork, whatever, I would have a contract that they had to sign. And this, I'm not kidding. I don't care if people are taken aback by it, but when you have something in writing, number one, it's a safeguard for both of you. Like, what you have to make, they know what they're going to get. But it also makes people take things seriously. If you say, okay, I'll get the contract ready, and they're surprised by that, then it shows that, they're not taking it seriously, and they're maybe thinking it's just kind of like, why are you making me sign a contract kind of thing? No, you want to have something in place because it makes people understand that this is a business transaction and it's not just you doing them a favor as a friend, right? All right, let me take a look at this again. Because this woman in this book is just an amalgamation. It's just all these mistakes that people made put together in one human form. It's terrible. All right, so the contract protects both you and the client. I had situations, I write this in here, I've had situations where brides complained about the design of the cake, and I pulled the contract out and said, here's your contract, this is what you ordered. And they're like, oh, okay. So you have to have that, or it just turns into a he said, she said kind of thing, and it doesn't turn out well, because if there is any kind of a dispute, you have to be able to show the credit card company or Etsy or whatever that you did send what was ordered. And there you go. Now, let's talk about deposits for a minute, because working with deposits is a weird thing. And you have to do, like I said, you have to kind of figure this out for yourself and what feels right for you, what you're willing to lose, because a lot of people will not pay the final payment. And then you're either stuck with a product that you can't sell because it's custom, or you can maybe sell it, but then do you have to pay the customer back if you sell it again? So you need to have your deposit schedule in place also. Again, very specific so that everybody knows what they're paying and what they're going to get back. And my deposit schedule, like I said, it was 50% at the beginning, and 2 weeks before it was the other 50%. And I did have brides who did not pay me, and they had just canceled the event and just assumed that I knew that. No, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what's going on. But a lot of times when people decide they don't want something, or they cancel, or they just don't need the product anymore, they just won't tell you because they're embarrassed. They don't want to say, oh yeah, I canceled my wedding. Whatever the reason is. I've actually delivered wedding cakes to weddings that were canceled, and no one told me. And that happened several times, actually, just for different reasons. And there was one, I went to a hotel, go in the ballroom. No one at the desk knew what was going on. So they're like, oh, the ballroom's over there. So I went in there. Nothing was set up, which was very unusual. And I usually was there about an hour and a half before the reception would start, so the cake wouldn't have to be sitting out too long. And the DJ was there. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, something's going on because there's a DJ. And we were talking, and he said, yeah, this is kind of weird because I didn't get a message or anything, but I'm just going to set up because I got paid to be here, And I said, okay. So I set the cake up, and that happened to be a wedding where I had rented the bride the stand. So she had rented the cake stand, and she had to return it to me. So it turned out that she had canceled the wedding because at the rehearsal dinner that her fiance was at, and everybody was having a good time, and it was great. It was fine the night before. They all went home. And then she got a phone call from her fiance's girlfriend who said, your fiance's been dating me for the last 3 years. And she decided not to marry the guy. Okay, so that's great, except nobody called me. So things happen. But if you have the deposit and you have, in this case, I actually delivered the product. And she did get it, and she brought the cake stand back to me. But there are situations where you're not going to get paid because people just aren't going to pay you. And if you're not paid in advance, if I wasn't paid in advance for that wedding, I probably would not have received the cake stand back. And I probably would not have been paid for the second half of that cake. Because a lot of people will do 50% up front and 50% after delivery. No, I don't do that. So just be aware that you need to make your contract benefit you before it benefits the customer, and make sure that you get paid before you do the work. And you're going to do the work. I'm not saying that you should rip the customer off, right? I'm saying that you just need to cover yourself, because this is your business and this is your income and it's your time and it's your casino themed gift baskets that the lady doesn't want. And now she suddenly just disappears, right? So just make sure that whatever payment schedule you work out is fine for you, and that if you lost that last payment, whatever it is, that you'd be okay with that. I was not okay with losing any of my money, and I never turned my oven on unless I was paid 100%. I did actually have situations where, like the night before I would have to bake the cake, I was like, I'm not making your cake, you haven't paid me, like 2 days before the wedding. And the night before, the money was coming in bit by bit on PayPal, and only because I knew the wedding planner. I don't know if I've told this story before, but it's pretty bad. And the wedding planner was like getting the bride to pay, like get $5 from this relative and $5 from that relative. It wasn't good, but I did get paid. I did deliver the cake, and she did cancel the wedding. So things happen. But people will just not pay you. And don't assume that if it's a friend that they're going to pay you, because that could be the worst. And, talking about friends and family, if you have, friends and family think that they can take advantage of you and you won't mind, because you're a friend. It's your friend. I'm your friend. What do you mean? And a lot of times when you say to a friend, great, I'll make the contract and you can sign it, they will be very confused. It's like, why should I sign a contract? And I think I mentioned that in here. Let's see. Yes, people say, but that's so formal. Why do you need a contract from me? You don't need a contract from me because I will pay you. No, you don't know that. And just say it's a business thing. I need to do this for my records. I need to do it for the credit card company, and you need to sign it or it's not an order, And don't let people say, oh, I'll pay you next week. Well, it's like, well, then I'll do your project next week when you pay me, because I don't work for free, And yeah, you really don't know that people will pay you. They think they can get away with it. They think they can push it off. But I think if we all think in your life, think about people who are like borrowing books, owing you money. There's always someone in your life who just doesn't return things, doesn't pay you. And it's probably the person that wants to get your work without a contract and is going to give you a hard time for asking for one. So just be aware of that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention in here is that when you have a contract, always make sure that the customer signs it first. And that, yeah, it sounds paranoid, but I know of situations, and this has actually happened to a photographer that I knew, that he sent the client a contract. The client signed it and sent it back to him, but they had changed the whole contract in Word. Like they had put the whole thing into Microsoft Word and had changed the whole contract and taken clauses out and changed the wording on things. No. And when I had my contract written up, it was written up by an attorney so that all of the language in it was legal in Virginia, which is where I live. And you really need to do that. If you're working with contracts, you need to have legal language that is correct for where you are, because it varies from place to place. Like some places will use the word retainer, some places won't. But you need to make sure that the customer signs the contract first, and then you sign it after you check it over. Never sign anything and send it to someone and have them sign it, because they can do whatever they want to it. And then suddenly you're responsible for making them 50,000 logos at no extra charge. That would be a little excessive, but you know what I mean. Just make sure that everything that you do is to protect you as well as the customer, but you first, because it's your business and it's your time and it's your contract. So you can write whatever you want in it. All right. Now I did say, let me just make sure here that I'm not missing anything major. Yeah, just say it again. It's not a hobby anymore. It's a business. Treat it like a business. Make sure that you are getting paid for your work because you should be paid for your work. Don't let people take advantage of you, blah, blah, blah. All right. Now, I did say I would tell you the story of the worst wedding cake customer in the world. And this woman was insane. She was nuts. And I have had many insane customers, but this one was special because she thought that she was special. All right. So I had delivered this cake. I think the backstory of this was that she was the mother of the bride. It's always the mothers of the bride. It's not the brides. Well, sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's the mothers. And when they came to the tasting, they wanted this cake not to be made of fondant, but it was a cake that had to be covered in fondant to get the effect that they wanted. And there are just some things you can't do with buttercream that you can do with fondant. And fondant, if you don't know, it's that rollable icing. It's made of sugar, but you roll it out like a sheet. You put it over the cake. It's really smooth. It gives you a very smooth appearance. There are some things you can do with fondant that you just can't do with buttercream. And I told them, I can't do that with buttercream. And they said, oh, okay, well, we'll have fondant on the tier that we want that design on. And I said, okay. And so I wrote that on the contract. So I had everything everything was done. I get to the venue, and at this point, I think that we had an elderly relative. I think it was my mother-in-law was in hospice care, and I was trying to deliver the cake and then come back, right? So I had a reason to come back. So I delivered the cake. The mother of the bride was there. This cake is beautiful. It's perfect. She's going on and on about how great. She loves it. It's perfect. It's wonderful. So I'm thinking, good, I'm getting out of here, right? So I'm in the car, I'm driving back. I don't have my phone turned on because I don't talk on my phone in the car, all right? And I'm driving back. I'm not checking my messages when I get there because I had other things to do. So apparently, in the time that it took me to leave and drive back, the cake went from being perfect to being nothing like what we ordered. And, the secret that people don't know is that when a wedding customer, complains about something, the first thing that the wedding, providers do is call the other vendors. So I got this crazy message on my phone the next morning. I think she called and chewed me out. And I actually hung up on her. I have never in my life been spoken to that way. And it's not like, I'm not a child. It was incredible the things she was saying to me. So I hung up on her and I called the venue and I spoke to the catering manager and I said, what is going on? Because the catering manager had been there when I was setting the cake up. And the catering manager said, yeah, she was not happy with a lot of things yesterday. And the cake was fine, but she was just not happy with a lot of things. And so, yeah. So anyway, I ended up talking to the bride. We worked it out because it was exactly what the contract said. But the key point of this is that while the mother of the bride was trying to chew me out, I said, it's exactly what I delivered in the contract. Like it says in the contract, that's what it was. And she said, the contract doesn't matter. And I was like, yeah, it kind of does. All right. So you want to have a contract for times like that when you have a psycho loony who is yelling at you because in 3 minutes she's changed from this is the best cake I've ever seen to it's nothing like what we ordered. And I know that the contract says that that's exactly what we ordered, but the contract doesn't matter. You can't argue with people like that. So I hung up on her, and I don't think I've ever hung up on anyone like not on a customer, but she was insane. So just make sure that you're getting things in writing and make sure that if you're selling on Etsy and that's your selling venue and you're not doing even if you don't do custom orders, just make sure that your policies are all in place because it is really something that I see a lot of people don't have policies in their shops. It makes no sense to me why you wouldn't, but apparently people just don't think about it. And you have to have your policies filled out because that is your backup. That backs you up when you say, I don't take returns. And people say, but where in your shop does it say that? So you have to have your policies filled out. If you do custom work, put limits on it. You have to let customers know this is what you're going to get. And if it's something that is very involved and is very expensive, get a contract and have them sign the contract before you start work. And again, this is before you start work. Don't do the work before you get paid and before you have an agreement in place about what you're supposed to be doing. Don't go out and buy supplies. Don't do anything. Because until you have that contract and you have the payment or a deposit that is based on your schedule, you don't have a customer, you have an inquiry. So just remember that. Leave me any questions, and I will talk to you next week about the next point in this book, which is, I don't even know. Let me look. Oh, this is a good one. You're judged by the company you keep. Yeah. All right. I would love to talk about that, and we'll talk about that next week. So I will see you then. Okay, bye.